Last time we were talking about what in Buddhism are called the four passing sites. And these are the sites that Gautama saw when he went outside the palace complex. And you remember the first three were very depressing sites, and the last one was an uplift site. The three depressing sites, why were they depressing? Because they illustrate that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's darkness at the end of the tunnel. You're going to get sick, you're going to get old, you're going to get dead.
Yeah.
And that is basic to Buddhism. In other words, that's what, if you look at reality, you worry about that. You know, where are we going? Downhill. It's pretty dismal. So Buddhism will be trying to offer an alternative to that, a remedy for that. I don't know what I've been calling this guy, but his real name is Gautama. Siddhartha. Buddha is a title. It means the awakened one, the enlightened one, and he comes to be called that only after he forms a community and has followers. So Gautama Siddhartha, the Buddha. Back to the story. He has now seen these four passing sights, and he can no longer continue as he was. He realizes that the world that his father has created for him and imprisoned him in is totally unreal. And it's totally unreal because it masks the realities that he just saw. It's a world without tragedy. It's a world where, you know, everything is a party. We're all having a wonderful time. Ho, 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 forever. And now he knows that ho, ho, ho is not forever. And ho, ho, ho is kind of silly in the first place. So he can't stay. And the story is kind of touching. I mean, if you read the whole account of it, the earliest account of it, he decides that he will leave. He has one helper, one kind of assistant whom he trusts very well. He tells him he's going to leave. And he tells him to get their horses and bring them around to the gate and then bribe the guards so they can get out and nobody will make any noise. And then, remember, he has a bunch of concubines and a wife or two and kids. And he realizes this means leaving them too. And he goes out to the courtyard. It's a hot summer day and they're all sleeping outdoors. They just have mats or mattresses on the ground. They're sleeping there. And he's walking by them and stepping over some of them and reflecting on, you know, the good times we've had together, and I really like these people and all. And then finally he gets to the gate and goes outside. And he gets on his horse, and his companion goes with him. And they go, remember, in Hindu and Buddhist material, the wilderness is always the big alternative to civilization. So they go into the wilderness, which means into the jungle or whatever kind of wild country they had there. What kind of wild country would they have had there? They would have had low forested areas, not desert places. So he would have gone into the forest. Those forests are still pretty forested. And if you go to India and take the trip most tourists take, sort of along the Ganges from the east end to the west end, you could go into them, and they're filled with single deer, beautiful animals. They're quite tame, and easy to see. It's a lovely place. So that's where they go. And when they get far in, where nobody goes, he gets off his horse, and he tells his companion to go. The companion doesn't want to go. He wants to stay with him. He says, no, you have to go. I have to do this all by myself. And then again, a kind of Indian sentimentality, he has to get rid of the horse. And the horse is very attached to him. So he tells the horse, go home. And the horse looks at him, "You crazy." So he finally has to beat the horse and shout at it. And he's weeping as he does this. And finally the horse looks totally perplexed and goes off. That's the last attachment gone now. Well, what do you do now? Here he is in the wilderness, horseless, friendless, everythingless. He has to find reality. And he remembers that last sight that he saw, which was the totally unprovided for man who looked totally happy. So, maybe there are some of them around, and he wanders through the woods and does find a settlement of people who look very much like Jains. They're not called Jains in any of the Buddhist things, but they're, very, very rigorous ascetics. They're in a little community. They have nothing much. And he says, "I would like to join you." And at first, they look at him, this is a kind of, very well-fed royal crown prince, and say, you got it wrong, you don't belong here. And he says, "Yeah, I think I do belong here, let me try it." So he stays with them, and he's full of zeal, and he tries to outdo them and everything. If they eat once a week, he'll eat once a month, things like that. If they sleep, leaning against a tree, he'll sleep without leaning. So all the way along, he's trying to reach a new level of asceticism. And not surprisingly, even they, who are extremely ascetic, say, you're kind of pushing this. And eventually, he's kind of ruined his health, ruined his strength. And he goes away from the group because he can't really deal with them anymore. And he's stumbling through the forest, emaciated, starved, dehydrated. And he sees a stream ahead. And he said, "I really need hydration." And he starts with the stream and just collapses on the ground. He can't go to the stream. He's kind of scraping at the ground. He can't move any farther. And he says, "Well, I guess that's it. This is passing sight number 3. They warned me." And while he's lying there, a girl from a nearby village comes by with a ceramic bowl on her head. And she sees him and stops and says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "Don't bother me, I'm just dying." And she takes the bowl, it's a bowl of soup, and she starts spooning the soup into him. And it's good soup. And he begins kind of coming back to again. And now in some sort of feminist Buddhist versions, she subsequently has a career of her own as kind of the she-Buddha. This is probably a later invention. I think that's her one walk-on part in this play. But anyway, she is remembered that way. And she takes care of him, and he gets back to some kind of health. And he says, "Well, one thing I learned is that extreme asceticism doesn't do it. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. So I got to find some other way." He now knows you got to eat and sleep and things like that. And he says, "Well, the meditation is something that's always been emphasized by holy people in India." He said, "I'm just going to go sit by that tree and try to deepen my meditation." And he does sit by the tree, and he's even described as sitting in the lotus posture and all. It's all kind of classical. And he begins meditating more and more deeply. And in the story, there's almost a devil figure, a supernatural being called Mara, who is all in favor of evil and sees bad things happening here. He's going to be very helpful, so we got to get rid of him. So it's got a little bit like Jesus' temptation in the desert. Mara comes and says, "This is crazy. Why are you doing this? You're a crown prince. I can get you reinstated, everything will be fine, or I can get you a new place all your own." So all these kind of comfort things, and he will have none of it. And finally, Mara curses and goes back to wherever bad supernatural beings go. And then he continues the meditation. He goes all the way. He's lost self-consciousness. He's lost consciousness of all outer stimuli, and then suddenly he reaches what Buddhists call nirvana, a state of perfect tranquility, perfect bliss. And again, there's almost a Disney-like feature in the story. All the forest celebrates, all the birds come around and sing. So now he's the Buddha. He is awakened. And he feels great. And the last thing that Mara said was, if you're going to do this, at least keep it to yourself. Because nobody is going to do what you look at your life. Who else is going to go through that to get where you are now? So just don't mention it. And that's the last thing he rejects. He says, if I succeed, I will impart this to others. So he goes off and he's going to impart it to others. He is now an enlightened one. He's not worried about anything. As he travels, he meets his old buddies, the ascetics. There they are, still looking, like death warmed over. And he goes up to them, and they see, he's fleshed out. He's looking pretty good. So to them, he's a betrayer of the cause. This guy is terrible. And he says, well, you know me. You used to like me. There's a reason why I appear the way I appear now. So I would like us to all meet tomorrow in the deer park. There's a park there where deer wander around. And I'll try to explain things to you. So in the deer park at Varanasi, in modern India, Benares originally. He has them all sit around and he preaches sort of the Buddhist equivalent of the Sermon on the Mount. This is his address, and it's very structured. It takes the form of a doctrine that is not in any sense religious, that is, he says, just commonsensical. He says the first thing is what I learned from the first 3 passing sights. The world is tragic. The secular world that we know is tragic, ultimately. You can kid yourself for a while, but ultimately it's not going anywhere. And the way he expresses that is everywhere there is dukkha. I think it's a U. And dukkha means wrongness, not workingness. The metaphor that's most popular for it is dukkha is like a wheeled vehicle with no axle. In other words, the wheels can't turn. The axle is gone. The axle is broken. You push it and it just grinds into the ground. So everything is like that. Everything ultimately is tragic. And you're to meditate on that. And it's a long, long meditation on it. You consider all the best things you find in life, and consider them deeply, and consider where they're going. They're all going to end, aren't they? And this is a very sobering kind of preachment that you get at this point. But it's, I'm sure there are people you love deeply. They're going to die. There are things you are trying to accomplish. You'll never finish, etc., etc., etc. So that's the first of the Four Noble Truths. So, when we put it, dukkha is pervasive everywhere. tragic sense of life. Second, why? Why do we find everything ultimately disappointing? Because of our craving. We always want more. We always want longer. We're never satisfied. So the term for that is Tanya. Craving sort of, unlimited consumerism. And you think we're all, consumers totally, deeply, and that's the trouble. We always want more, and you're always going to wind up with less. So it's still a tragic picture. This wrongness is everywhere because we crave so much, we experience it that way, which reminds you that dukkha is a state of mind. It's how you are about it. It's not that something's wrong out there, something's wrong in there. I want more and I'm not going to get it. I want to live forever and I'm going to die. I want to keep my money and it's not going to do me any good at a certain point in my health, etc. So the third of the Noble Truths is, and this is the upbeat part,
so the dukkha is not physical suffering. It's
no, it's our experience of it. No, it's mental.
Is it moral?
It's moral as well as other things, that comes into the thing too. We all, the best of us want to be perfect people, and we never are. We always find failings in ourselves. But realistic. I mean, you meet many perfect people. And that's what it's all based on. I mean, it's the meditation is think about it. Aren't I right? If not, let's talk about it some more. But there is nothing fully satisfying in our world, and we always want it to be. So to eliminate dukkha, eliminate Tanya. So the cure for this tragic experience of the world is the elimination of that attribute of ordinary human beings which brings it about. Get rid of your craving and you'll get rid of the dukkha.
Is there anything personal about the Tanya or the dukkha itself?
I'm not sure what you mean. Dukkha is the ultimately unsatisfactory character of everything in your experience. Nothing really fully satisfies. Tanya is an attribute of all ordinary human beings. We all want more. Okay, am I answering your question? I'm not sure what you mean by being personal. Tanya is in every person.
It would be personal. It would be personal.
Yeah, yeah.
We all crave something.
But it's not individual, I mean, it's everybody,
Yeah, everybody's craving something.
Right. Okay, so am I answered?
Well, but but each of us, it happens to each of us individually.
Yes.
And it's up to us to deal with it one way or another.
Yes. And Buddhists and moralists will say it's in each of us individually, and then we incorporate it. We organize things in a way that is, again, satisfying our cravings. Our business undertakings, our military undertakings, what are they all trying to do? We want a bigger empire. We want more money. We want, everything is to get more. Everything is kind of institutionalized craving. Yeah. So it can be made into a social formula as well as an individual. And So how do we do that? To eliminate dukkha, eliminate Tanya. How do you eliminate Tanya? Follow
Eightfold path.
the Eightfold Path, right. Now, there are a lot of paths in Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism. You've seen the term marga, like Artha Marga and Jnana Marga and things like that. It means a path. So it's a program. What do you do? Now you notice, this is probably a good time to bring it up, you notice nothing religious has come into this anywhere. This is sheer kind of social psychology. Nor will anything religious ever come into it. The Buddha was not, explicitly an atheist, but his doctrine has no religious content as such. Later on, his followers made it religious in many, many different and conflicting ways.
So Buddhism is a religion for people that don't really crave religion.
Right, right. It's a religion for people who, reflect on their world and find that it's ultimately unsatisfactory and wonder if you can do anything about it. Is it me or is it it? And of course he's saying it's you. It's not it. So how do you get rid of your Tanya? You follow the Noble Eightfold Path. And I think I gave you the main labels in the Eightfold Path here.
You did.
Yeah. This is kind of the, sort of like the Ten Commandments of Buddhism. Not delivered by God, but the Buddhists would say delivered by common sense. This is everything, Buddhists emphasize that everything is empirical. You can check everything by trying it. The first one is right view. This is in that third paragraph in the sheet. Right view means accepting this. And until you accept it, there's no point going any farther. So in typical Buddhist teaching, you can discuss this with your guru or whoever as long as you want. But if you're still thinking, maybe this is just nuts, then you can't go on from there. This has to be a total. You really have to see reality that way, and you have to accept this human craving as the source of human suffering. Once you do, you have taken step one of the Noble Eightfold Path. Step two. Resolution means pursuing this unqualifiedly. Detachment, I think I put down here. Not, maybe a little craving on the side, or craving on Sundays, something like that. No, this has to be complete detachment from any other preferences that you may previously have had. You have to resolve to, leave all your baggage behind.
Speech.
The third one is right speech, and the right speech has two aspects. It's truthful, and it's not deceiving, and it's not hurtful. Truthful and not deceiving are the same. So not hurtful. So you must never use speech to make people unhappy. So no insults, no mockery, no jeering, no cursing, that kind of thing. And your speech must always be to impart truth, not falsehood. Now, they don't get into the quibbles about you made a mistake. Mistakes are okay, but lies are not okay. The next one is right conduct. And this has considerable elaborations. It's, as I mentioned, here, specific rules of austerity. And that goes into, details about, eating and sleeping and working and things like that. We don't need to go into all of that. But it just means, a program of life that's consistent with these values.
So it would be not too much of anything.
Not too much of anything.
Not too much
Right,
of anything.
right. And the readiness to share, that's always part of it. The next one is, it's interesting, I think, right livelihood. That's very strong in Buddhism. And it's always seemed to me to be one of the things most neglected in other ethical codes. Buddhists are very insistent that most of us spend most of our lives at some job. And some jobs shouldn't be done by anybody. They're lousy things to do. They're deceiving people, or they're killing people, or they're cheating people, or something of the kind. In other words, the job, your secular vocation, should be something that is helpful, something you can be kind of proud of. It's helpful to others, it's good for you. So wholesome employment might be the term. But they make a great deal of that. And it's even come up in many modern discourses and so on. You have Buddhist discussions of armaments manufacture and so on. Buddhists will say, yeah, we know you have to protect yourselves, but the armaments you're manufacturing are not just for protecting yourself, therefore exterminating large numbers of people, etc. Buddhists have been very opposed to most advertising, because most advertising is kind of bullshit, and it's one sort or another. And it's deceptive, it creates cravings, it creates misapprehensions and so on. So a wholesome job, wholesome employment is very much pushed by Buddhists. And so, not surprisingly, the Buddhists are very favorable to doctors, teachers, people who have some service they render to others, and to plumbers and people like that, people who do things that you got to have done. But manufacture of lethal things, advertising of useless or harmful things, they would be at the bottom of the list. It's quite developed. There are a lot of Buddhist treatises on right livelihood.
I know an artist who claims to be a Buddhist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's particularly in the Far East. Buddhism has a rich artistic tradition. They've cultivated it. It kind of blends with other Oriental religions. Say something like that. Now you notice also that you can be a Buddhist and anything else you want. I mean, if you want to be a Catholic Buddhist, you can be a Catholic Buddhist. I mean, Thomas Merton, who I noticed Thomas Merton's CDs are out on sale again now. He always said he was a Catholic Buddhist. He said there's nothing in Buddhism that I don't heartily accept. And he said, and I do find that my sense of spiritual fellowship is stronger with a Buddhist monk than with a Christian businessman. Which kind of, in a way says it all. But there's no conflict there at all. Buddhism in its primitive form is compatible with any religion, except warlike religions, I guess.
Effort.
Right, effort. What are you using your high energy for? To do something beneficial, something that the world is a little better for your impact on it. So productive of good. I exert myself to improve matters, and that can be within your family, within yourself, within your community, within your world. But good doing in that sense.
That can overlap with the right business.
Oh, sure. It should overlap with
it.
Yeah. Also, I should mention, with regard to right livelihood, have a livelihood. Unless you're a monk, in which case the monastic life will eclipse everything. Don't just kind of loaf. I'm not doing any harm. No, you're not doing any good either.
So the panhandlers on De Gaulle are not Buddhists.
Right, mindfulness. This is dispassionate awareness. In other words, unbiased recognition of the truth. Not letting your biases, your preferences, your tastes shape your view of reality. And that, of course, goes back to those, it would be nice if the four passing sights were not what they were. But if you're going to face reality, you'll take them for what they were. That's why he has that little scenario of his companions telling him, well, we call it sickness, but it's nothing much. Yeah, it's something much. And so on with the rest of it. So, unbiased, honest confrontation of reality. And finally, concentration. This is the meditation itself. The meditation that the Buddha made under the tree, the meditation that ideally every Buddhist will be able to make if he lives that kind of life. If he doesn't live that kind of life, maybe not, would depend. It's a matter of degree always. The meditation itself is outlined in a lot of Buddhist material, but it's, I think the general idea of it is familiar to everyone. You begin by eliminating the distractions, turn off the things around you, and then begin to turn off the things inside you. You turn off, okay, I'm not hearing the, my kids screaming anymore, things like that. And you move from there to kind of worrying about what I'm going to do tomorrow. No, that's got to go too, your own preoccupations. And then your sense of your own body, my elbows hurt or something like that. I can't stand crossing my legs this way. That too, you got to get past. So you get past all these distractions and you wind up with what? In one way, nothing. I mean, everything that we normally think of as constituting experience has now been eliminated, and it's at that point that nirvana will come, that enlightenment will come, that tranquility, bliss will come. And that's what the last figure of the four passing sights, and that's why he's always represented smiling. He has nothing and he feels good. So in a way, Buddhism, having nothing and feeling good, is not too bad a summary of the ideal Buddhist way of life. So that's the outline of it. It's a clear outline. I don't think there's any much clearer than most outlines of religious foundations. And it's not religious in the sense of, we don't invoke anything outside ourselves, outside our communities in order to bring this about. You can bring it with you into religion, you can bring religion into it, but it of itself does not involve religion. Okay, is there anything more we should say about that?
Well, except for the smiling part, it sounds like you're describing a Vulcan.
Yeah.
Mr. Spock,
Yeah.
It's very logical.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it certainly is. And I think Buddhists kind of like that, at least the traditional Buddhists like the simple explanations. Very much inclined, even when you read old Buddhist sermons, they're always, like a good teacher pausing to ask, does everybody get it? Does anyone have any objections? Anyone have any better ideas? Clarity all down the line.
So there's no afterlife if you've reached
There's no afterlife, but there's
nirvana.
there's no ultimate death either. In other words, it's like moksha in Hinduism. You are now absorbed into the great everything. Your individuality is gone, but it would be gone anyway. Remember, we saw that in Hinduism, where if you remove everything individual, what's left? same thing that everybody else has left when they eliminate everything individual.
But you're not reincarnating in...
No, you're not reincarnating.
Like
You
the
would be
Hindus.
if you didn't do this.
Yeah.
Because Buddhism holds with the reincarnation thing. So it's basically it has the same aim as those different yogas, those different margas that Krishna pointed out to Arjuna in the chariot. Ultimately moksha and nirvana are pretty, for our purposes, the same thing. They release you from rebirth, and you can experience them within this life. That's true of moksha also. That is to say, it's not something's going to happen when you die, but something happens right then. So that part of your life remains marked by this, and visible to others, and influential on others. And that will...
So consciousness will continue to exist. What will be left over?
Nothing individual, not individual consciousness, no.
Even consciousness?
No. Everyone will be absorbed into ultimacy, really. Like Brahman and Atman in Hinduism. It may be worth reflecting that this religion was taken up very strongly by Spinoza and borrowed from Spinoza by Einstein. Einstein thought, people used to say Einstein was an atheist. He said, no, I am not an atheist. Well, what I mean by God is probably different from what you mean by God. And he said, it's what Spinoza meant, it's what the Buddha meant. So my individuality is going to go, but I am not going to go because I am part of the eternal.
When they reach the end, that they've done everything, is there a spirituality or that other people can see it in them, or we just take for granted if they say, hey, I've reached the end and I'm perfect or whatever now?
No, one who has reached it is supposed to be quite perceptible as someone who has reached it. And that will have a big impact on another kind of Buddhism that we'll be talking about probably next time. But there is a charisma that goes with it. And it's there are a lot of narratives illustrating this kind of thing, and some of the charisma just goes with following the Noble Eightfold Path. The one who has reached this has also achieved all those qualities in the Noble Eightfold Path, so they're totally unthreatening. These are not people who are seeing what they can get from you or anything of the kind. They're just there, and they can be any help. They'll be glad to help because that's part of the Eightfold Path too. Yeah. So that is often what is first perceived. The example of this who's most cited nowadays is, of course, the Dalai Lama. And I've heard many people say, when you're in the Dalai Lama's presence, you kind of feel, this is someone you can just totally confide in, and there's nothing to worry about, and he's very helpful. He has written an ethics book recently, which is kind of Buddhist ethics in a Western idiom, and it's pretty good. Certainly, any Christian could subscribe to all of it, no trouble at all.
Is the Dalai Lama educated in our terms, in Western civilization?
He is, yes, French educated, yeah. Dalai Lama is peculiar. The Dalai Lama belongs to Tibetan Buddhism, which is very primitive and kind of superstitious and so on. He's trying to change it from that into something more like classical Buddhism. But he has a little obstacle in the Chinese taking over and trying to impose Chinese culture on Tibet. And that's why he can't go there anymore. He's not welcome in Chinese Tibet. And that's why he tours and tries to develop sympathy for this, and also kind of to impart what he thinks of as Buddhist wisdom along the way.
And I think he's a symbol of peace through the world. As he travels around, he seems to want us to quit having wars and things.
Oh yeah, very, very definitely, very much a peacenik in that sense. And you remember his meeting with Pope Francis. I mean, Francis was clearly saying, "This is my kind of guy." So, yeah, they're totally on the same wavelength.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu also
Yes,
been
yes.
working with him.
Yes. I must say Buddhism in history has been a very peace-loving and peace-preserving religion, and we call it a religion. There are some exceptions nowadays. One is in Myanmar, where the Buddhists are persecuting the Muslims, and one is in Sri Lanka, where the Buddhists are persecuting the Tamil Hindus. These, however, are very unusual. Throughout the rest of history, you don't find much of that anywhere. And that has, interestingly, often caused them to kind of move out of places where, you know, war and violence is what it's all about, because they can't fight back. I mean, that's not part of their deal. So let's just find someplace else where people would like to live in a different way. And that has caused the spread of them, particularly toward the Far East. But yeah, no religion has been more peaceful, I guess. I mean, some little religions like the Jains, they're totally peaceful, but they're so small. And always emphasizing that. It also had a big impact on their politics during the time when Buddhism was the imperial religion. And religion is always in quotes. Of India. We'll say something about it afterward. The Emperor Ashoka, who ruled all of India, became a Buddhist, and his reign is quite remarkable. We'll say something about it afterwards. See where we are now. Okay. So all of this was the sermon in the Deer Park, and after that, the ascetics were converted, and they became his first disciples. For a long time, disciples of the Buddha were kind of wandering mendicants. They had nothing much. They offered spiritual counsel. They accepted alms, as they do to this day. But after a while, they began forming settlements. And this was mainly in the second generation, and the settlements tended to be centered on places where earlier ones had died. You know, so-and-so was buried here. You know, that's a good place for a little village. We all revere him. So little places developed that way. Their lifestyle was entirely monastic, celibate. They got pretty early to be Buddhist women, and the women also were celibate. And then towards, after maybe 2 centuries of that kind of thing, Buddhist laity developed. That is to say, more and more non-monks who followed Buddhist doctrine as far as they could, while, you know, living a family life and you know, doing the kinds of things you have to do to feed your family and so on. So by that time, there were a lot of lay Buddhists, and there were Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks were always the ideal. In other words, your laity were always trying to be a little more monk-like, because the monks represented the way you were supposed to be.
How do they keep from starving to death?
Begging. Begging.
Begging bowls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carry your little bowl.
Yeah. Have any of you seen them? Have you been in Buddhist places? Yeah.
I've been to the monasteries, just, I guess they don't call it a monastery, it's but they do have the begging bowls, and
Yeah.
if you're there,
Yeah.
you can, you know, contribute whatever.
Right.
and That's the way they support themselves.
Yeah. And in the towns, very early in the morning, they'll go walking through town, the monastery people. They all seem to go in age order. The oldest ones are the first in line, and little monklets at the end of the line. And they're all carrying their bowls, and the townspeople know they're coming, and they're already there. Your mama will run out and give you something. It's food, it's not money. It'll be rice or something that you cooked the night before, some pastry or something of the kind. And they're going back to the monastery with that before most people are even up at sunrise.
It surprised me, the begging bowls, the people that I saw giving were giving things like bags of potato chips and soda. And this doesn't even square with what I think they would want to eat. But
Is that on their diet?
They have no dietary restrictions, except they
They're
don't eat
vegetarian.
meat. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. You're vegetarian, and can't think of any others. I mean, that eliminates a lot.
So that's why you get potato chips and soda, because they're vegetarian. You can't give them any beef jerky.
Incidentally, you may have noticed there are statues of the Buddha everywhere. And later, in the later development of Buddhism, one kind of Buddhism regarded the Buddha as divine. And then it turns into a religion, but certainly the Buddha would have been very surprised and very disappointed.
Jim, there's a Buddhist temple, a Vietnamese temple right across in Blackman's Parish. And they've been there since 1975.
Not that long, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we got one in here in Algiers down
Right
on
on
the
the stump,
English
huh?
Turn, and there's one on Stump
On
up in
Stump.
Gretna.
And
In
they
fact,
have
they're
Buddhists?
rebuilding.
Yeah.
They're and the people in the parishioners, I guess they're building the new temple. That's why it's taking so long, because they're doing it themselves. They're on Stump Boulevard.
A few years ago, the beautiful one, they were traveling all over, and it was across from Access, where I was going for therapy. And I mentioned it. She said, well, just drive down the street. She said, it's so big, you'll never miss it. So I drove down the street. It was huge. And I don't know what type of material it was made out of, but it was.
I got out of the car.
Did you go?
And I
did
went
too.
in.
I didn't go in.
And I asked them, I said, is it all right if I go in? You know, I said, I'll be very, respectful.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, yes, please come in. Yes, come.
They tend to be very welcoming.
And so I went in and I just kind of sat down and meditated for a little while. It was so peaceful and so nice.
You have
It was
feeling of peace.
Yeah, it was some statue of Buddha that was traveling around.
Yeah, and it was in the paper, in our Algiers paper.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's why
I made a
went there
special
to
trip
see
and
it.
went up there.
Yeah, well, Buddhist temples are multiplying because of the immigration. The first big wave of them were Vietnamese, and Vietnam is like half Catholic and half Buddhist. So we got a lot of Buddhist as well as Catholic Vietnamese moving in. And they want a place to worship, so they create them. I remember my wife was from Minnesota, a little farm town in Minnesota. And they began building a big Buddhist temple there. And I saw it one time, we were visiting her family. And I said something to somebody about that structure down there. I could tell what it was, because I kind of know how they do it. They said, yeah, we think it's going to be an Oriental restaurant. The Minnesota response. It would be a good Garrison Keeler.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Can we do anything? We can do a little, yeah. Let's go on to say a little bit about Ashoka, the emperor, 3rd century emperor. He's quite remarkable, not only to historians of religion, but to historians of everything. He's considered one of the really kind of incredible emperors in all of history. In the 3rd century, the Mauryan Empire covered about a third of the Indian Peninsula, Mauryan. And it was founded by Chandragupta, and he had a son who didn't do very much, and then the next son, was one named Ashoka. Now this empire was expanding rapidly. It was very powerful. And Ashoka took up the job of expanding it still further. And expanding it, as often happens with imperial expansion, was a combination of moving into lands where they were pretty welcome because they didn't like the existing government, and moving into lands where they were not welcome because they did like the existing government. And Ashoka was regulating this whole process and directing the military, and he directed the military to take over a particular area. And this area was one that he thought would come pretty easily, and it didn't. They put up a strong resistance, and following his orders to occupy it, they attacked it, and there was just terrible bloodshed, a real massacre. They went back and told him that we've taken this. He said, but there were many casualties. And he said, I want to go there and see what you mean by that. So he went and looked at the scene and said, I just never could have believed that an order of mine would have led to anything like this. And he said, I will never again do anything like that. And shortly after that, he became a Buddhist, because he recognized Buddhism as corresponding to his present state of mind.
Was he something else before?
He was a Hindu.
He was a Hindu.
Mm-hmm. Not a devout Hindu, but a Hindu. And he began then spreading the empire simply by persuasion and offering of a better life. And it worked pretty well. And by the end of it, this a man should do who knows what is good for him, who understands the meaning of the place of peace, nirvana. He should always be able and upright and truly straight, kindly of speech, mild and without any conceit. He should be well content and easily satisfied, having very few wants and very simple tastes. With composed senses, discreet, never arrogant or grasping. In his deeds there should never be meanness, for which the wise might blame him. May all be happy and safe, may all beings gain inner joy, this should be his daily prayer. All living beings, whatever, without exception, weak or strong, long or high, middling or small, subtle or gross, seen or unseen, dwelling afar or near, in the air, in the water, under the earth, born or yet unborn, he should try to give them all joy. So this is the animals are all of them. May no being ever deceive another, nor in any way scorn another person, nor in anger or ill will desire another's sorrow. As a mother cares for her son, her only son, all her days, so toward all living things, a man's mind must be all-embracing. Friendliness for the world, all-embracing, he should raise in his mind, above, below, and across, unhindered, free from hate and ill will, standing, walking, sitting, or lying down until he falls peacefully asleep. He should remain firm in his mindfulness, for this is the sublime mood. Avoiding all false views, virtuous, filled with insight, let him conquer the lust of the passions, that's Tanya. And he shall never again be born in the womb. So it's no reincarnation for him. So it's a good description of, what they thought of was a good human being.
It's a wow.
Yeah, I mean, then who's going to argue with that?
Somebody should send that to all our politicians.
Maybe we need some Rocky Dicks instead of the political commercial. Okay, we'll go on to the changes and transformation of Buddhism.
Very good.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.